Back and better than ever. Greeny with you. Presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Today they will include Brett Favre. 1 hour from now. The legend live with me for 15 minutes. Talking about Aaron Rodgers, talking about Patrick Mahomes, and a whole lot more. Meanwhile, Doris Burke from the bubble in 15 minutes. Talking about the hoops. Also today, Bill Belichick is going to change football as we know it. And one of my favorite people ever said something that is just completely nuts. All that and a whole lot more on the way, but we have to start with this.
Gary Trent Jr. will dribble out the final 3 seconds. It's a Game 1 Rip City winner. The Blazers take down the Lakers.
Like I continue to say, this is different. This is different in an aspect of just, we're in a bubble with no fans. But as far as me being locked in on the game plan, that doesn't change.
I'm still going with the Portland Trailblazers.
To win the series.
To win the series. Now, LeBron, he's going to have to dominate the series because he's the only advantage they got.
So I love Charles Barkley. I do not agree that they're going to sweep. I'm not even about to say that the Lakers are going to lose this series, but you are seeing some of the obvious flaws that have been around all this season.
Trouble in the bubble for LeBron and the Lakers. Jackie Mack from this morning. Charles Barkley yesterday here told you it was going to happen. Then last night on TNT, he brought a broom. So that's the question. Are the Lakers legitimately in trouble? Are they in legitimate jeopardy of getting bounced in the first round by the Portland Trailblazers? The answer? No, they're not. Lakers are going to win. Lakers are going to win this series. I wouldn't be surprised if they wind up winning it easily from this point forward. And I will tell you exactly why. Two basic reasons. The first, the Portland Trailblazers played their 10th playoff game last night. Their 10th consecutive playoff game over the last 3 weeks. They've been in playoff mode from the moment everyone got back to the bubble. Damian Lillard told you during the break, he's not going back if it means he can't play for a playoff spot. He wanted to play games that mattered. They've been playing games that mattered for almost a month. The last time LeBron James' team played a game that mattered was March. The last time LeBron James' team played a game that mattered, you didn't know what the coronavirus really was. It was something that shut down the Chinese Basketball Association and might have some impact here. Think about how long ago that was. That's the last time LeBron's team played a game that mattered. So they're going to need a little time to get going. They also didn't seem to have it last night, and LeBron, and you heard it in that open, acknowledged that he didn't feel it. He's having trouble getting used to the no fans and all the rest of it. And R.J. Williams this morning on our new morning show did not like hearing that from LeBron.
This is what fuels the LeBron James detractors when you compare him to the likes of Kobe Bryant, when you compare him to the likes of Michael Jordan. I want LeBron James to be a lion. I want him to sound like a lion sounds. What a lion sounds like after a game when you lose? No, we weren't good enough today. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
I will agree with Jay to an extent. I wasn't crazy about LeBron saying that either, but the primary reason is I'm not crazy about the fact that it is the case. I'm going to chalk more of this up to the strangeness and the rust than not being intense enough. And it is my belief that the primary reason I remain convinced the Lakers will come back and win this series is that LeBron James is not going to let this happen. He just referenced, Jay did, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. What those guys would have done is exactly what LeBron will do. He will put this team on his shoulders. There is no conceivable chance he lets them lose in this circumstance. He will figure out exactly what Jay just said and what I'm saying, that you have to ignore the fact that you've got pretend people sitting in the stands with piped-in noise. You have to put the uniqueness, the unusual nature of the circumstances completely aside and play. And you better do it quick because the other team has the best player in the world right this minute. Right this second, Damian Lillard is the best basketball player in the world. And I love that guy. And if you don't love Damian Lillard, if you don't love watching him play, then you don't love basketball. He's unbelievable, and he alone makes them dangerous. But last night, the Lakers shot 5 of 32 from three-point range. That won't happen again. No way that happens again. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis combined to score 51 points. They will score 70 in Game 2. The Lakers scored 93 points in a playoff game last night. They held Portland to 100 and lost. That won't happen again. So last night was a night filled, I think, with irregularities. Now, do I like Charles walking around the studio with a broom? Who doesn't? What's there not to like about that? It's awesome. And it's what makes Charles great. And I respect his opinion, but I disagree. I think LeBron is going to come back and play out of his mind. Do you remember when LeBron's back is against the wall, 9 out of 10 times he's brilliant. The difference between LeBron and Michael is that 10th time. Michael, when his back was against the wall, 10 out of 10 times was brilliant. LeBron's percentage is about as good as anybody else's ever. And LeBron will come out like a maniac in game 2. And Anthony Davis will play, and they will score 70 between them. They scored 51 last night. They will score 70 between them. This team will figure out how to throw the ball in the ocean, which they couldn't do last night, and they will win game 2. There's another factor in this, and that is that in a normal circumstance, the Blazers would have accomplished more last night than they did, which is to say that this is just a best of 7. And it doesn't make any difference, really, in what order you win the games. In any other year in NBA history, what the Blazers would have done last night was steal home court advantage. But there is no home court advantage to steal. So they didn't actually steal anything last night. They just won a game. And they need to win 4. And as much as I respect them and as much as I love Dame, they won't. The Lakers will win the series. 5 or 6 games. They will come back and play huge. And the primary reason is because LeBron will figure out exactly how they need to do it. I'm counting on that. So they're not in trouble. Neither are the Bucks, another 1 seed that lost their first game. But the Bucks are not in trouble for an entirely different reason. The Bucks are not in trouble because A, they will still beat Orlando, and B, they weren't winning it all anyway. If you watch Milwaukee, I love the Bucks. I love Giannis, and I'm about to explain to you why the league needs Giannis to stay in Milwaukee. But that team has no earthly idea where they want to go for a bucket late in a close game. It's what killed them last year against Toronto, and it will be their downfall again. They're my 4th pick in the Eastern Conference. I know I'm going to make everybody in Milwaukee mad at me, and I don't mean it that way. I'm just giving you my honest assessment. I'd love to be wrong, and Lord knows I usually am. Hashtag KOD. If you're listening in Milwaukee right now, if you're going to Carl Roch's for dinner tonight, you should be, well, you probably can't do that right now. But if we were living in the world right now, then you would be saying, thank goodness, Greeny thinks we're going to get worked. You're going to win this series. But Toronto, Boston, even Miami, I like coming out of the East before I do the Bucks. And I'll tell you why I hope I'm wrong. I've lived my whole life basically in 2 cities, 2 of the 3 biggest cities in America. New York and Chicago. I grew up in New York, then I grew up again in Chicago. And I've lived in one or the other basically all of my life. But I'm a firm believer that in sports, for sports to work, for these leagues to work at their best, these small market teams have to matter. One of the many things that made the NFL so great in recent years was that Peyton Manning was in Indianapolis and Brett Favre was in Green Bay, and they were the 2 biggest stars in the league. And the fact that they were in Indianapolis and Green Bay didn't have any impact on that at all. So the NBA needs Giannis in Milwaukee. They need Zion in New Orleans. They need Ja Morant in Memphis. If those guys are just going to play for a while there and then leave to go to one of their bigger markets, why are their teams there? Why have a team in Milwaukee or Memphis if you don't want them to be good? We need them to be good. You need a fence to be as strong. I get this one wrong all the time. Is a fence as strong as its weakest link? Is a chain, whatever it is, that is only as strong as its weakest whatever? That's what the NBA needs to be. So I want to see Milwaukee win. I want to see Giannis win because I am genuinely concerned that he will leave there if they lose. And I don't want to see that happen. It's not going to happen in this round. They'll beat Orlando. But I think it might stop there. And they won't get past Toronto if they wind up playing them. I'm Greeny, and I'm presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. As we continue, Doris Burke, she's going to join us live next from the bubble with her thoughts on all of this. And then Bill Belichick is about to change football as we have always known it with one move. And I'll tell you what that is as we continue. Just getting started. I'm Greeny. Greeny back with you on ESPN Radio. You can watch on TV on ESPN News if you like. Presented by Progressive Insurance. And my first guest today joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. We go inside the bubble for the best in the business. Doris Burke. Hello, Doris.
Good morning, Greeny. And did I see something to suggest that in your opening segment, you are more confident than ever in the Los Angeles Lakers? Because if that's true, I want to know why.
That is correct. Because nothing could possibly go as badly for them as it went last night. They shot 5 of 32 from 3. LeBron doesn't look awake. The Bucks, here's what I said. The Trailblazers, whom they are playing, played their 10th playoff game last night in 3 weeks. The last time the Lakers played a meaningful game was at a time when most people in America didn't know what the coronavirus was. Think how long ago that was. The Lakers will wake up. LeBron will figure it out, and I have total confidence in him to figure out whatever it is they need to do strategically. I think he and Anthony Davis will combine for 70 points in Game 2, where they scored 51 last night, and I remain very confident they will win. Am I nuts?
No, you know what? Your sentiment about, the required level of playoff intensity and rhythm is valid as it relates to the Portland Trailblazers. And this series may eventually go in their favor. But what I do think is the flaws are real for the Los Angeles Lakers as it relates to their championship aspirations. I, too, because I've had a front row seat, have incredible confidence in LeBron James and in Anthony Davis because of his skill set. My concerns are this. All season long, half-court scoring has been, at times, an issue for this team because the consistent long-range shooting has not always been there. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who has been terrific for them all year long, has got to prove in the crucible of the playoffs that he can consistently make those shots. It's one thing to play well in the regular season. It's an entirely different thing to make those open shots around LeBron and AD because you are the guys who are going to get them, Alex Caruso, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Kyle Kuzma. I also think, Greeny, they have lived and thrived off their defense and in transition. That length at the rim, the ability to protect the paint is real, and they play out of that. And the absence of Avery Bradley at the point of attack to sort of be disruptive is real. And so, yes, I think ultimately they can win the series. Though, as you know, Portland would have been likely ahead of Dallas in the standings because of their experience and all the talent had they been healthy from the outset. So this is not your typical 8 seed. And what do the Lakers have to do to get out of this series? I'm really curious. And one more point on the Lakers, because I am and I've said this to you before, and it really intrigues me. One of the things Frank Vogel had said to us in a coaches meeting, prior to the game, just discussing a lot of different things about his team, and it's invaluable to us. And he talked about Anthony Davis' ability to make three-point shots being one of the things they have to see consistently because of the spacing on the floor. And, I believe he is a monster talent. But that's the greatness that's going to be required from Anthony Davis and LeBron James nightly to win a championship is real. And so I love your confidence because I believe in LeBron James implicitly, but it's just they're fascinating to me on so many levels, the Lakers.
We've got 4 games tomorrow. Doris has 2 of them, Pacers, Heat, and Magic Bucks on ESPN. And there's along those lines, Doris, like LeBron was talking after the game last night about how hard it is to get used to being without the fans and all of that. I can tell you that watching on television, they've done an extraordinary job of making it feel as close to normal as I think it possibly could. But you're there. Just how different is the environment than it would be under normal circumstances?
It's a great point because I had wondered what the viewer was experiencing at home because I know when I'm in my room, and then also I had gone to the play-in between Portland, and when I'm locked into the game and the drama that is and the incredible high level of basketball that's being played down here, I don't feel the difference. I do, however, when I'm required to call the game myself, find it different, Greeny, in this way. I'm further away from the action, and I'm looking through about an inch of plexiglass, and all of those things are 100% appropriate. And so it's slightly more challenging. I take a beat more often than I would typically. I don't necessarily pick up on the nuance of interaction between teammates. I can't see the players on the bench, and you pick up clues in the course of a game how a team is reacting, how an individual player is reacting. What's the interaction between head coach and player? I am at such a distance that I don't see all that. So it is fascinating for me to hear LeBron James say that, to know that it is different. And obviously, if they were to meet the Clippers in a 7-game series, that could have been a 7-game home game series for the Lakers, because we know how much Los Angeles is a Laker town. And so I am fascinated, and I can't feel the difference, but I am paying very close attention to what those players say, because as somebody being required to, or being fortunate enough to announce it, I feel a difference in my coverage.
It feels like it has gotten to LeBron a little. And that's another of the reasons I think he'll turn that around, because he'll just recognize there's nothing he can do about that, and he'll figure out a way to overcome it. At least he'll have to. If not, then this run is going to be short, whether it ends in this round or not. Doris with us on the Shell Pentoll Performance Line. So I mentioned you've got 2 Eastern Conference games tomorrow. Every team in the East has played 1 game. The Bucks have lost to the Magic. The Celtics have lost Gordon Hayward. Toronto looks really good, as they have. Miami with a 1-game lead. Through your eyes, through 1 game, who looks like the team to beat in the East?
Well, I've been saying this throughout the course of the 8 seeding games and the first couple of weeks. I think Toronto is a real threat. And I'm going to go back to something Frank Vogel said to me in a Zoom call as we prepped for one of his games in the regular season. And that was, I said, I think Toronto is a legitimate threat to come out of the East. And Frank's response to me, Greeny, was, come out of the East. He said, I think they're a legit threat to repeat. So he's not saying he thinks they will repeat. He just thinks they are legit. Here's what I know about the Raptors. They are deep. They are championship pedigree. They carry themselves differently. They execute at a high level on both ends of the floor. They are made up of individually sound defensive players who can follow a game plan, who know personnel, and who can flip in the middle of a possession from one defense to another. And there is incredible trust between a coach that is brilliant in Nick Nurse and the personnel that they have. Now, listen, you know this. In the course of an NBA playoff series, it grinds to a halt. In individual brilliance, those rare players like Kevin Durant, like LeBron James, like Steph Curry, who can, in those moments where things are at its most intense, the pressure is squarely on your shoulders, and those guys who can handle that with grace and deliver over and over and over again. Do they have that one player? They spent a season trying to groom Pascal Siakam to be that guy, to go make that mid-range shot under duress. And maybe for the first time, somebody comes out and it's a group effort where that's concerned. I don't know the answer to that. But I do think Toronto is a real threat in the East. Everyone is on Get Up in the morning has been picking the Raptors in the Eastern Conference. Doris Burke, again, will have Pacers Heat tomorrow and then Magic Bucks on ESPN, part of a 4-game day on ESPN's playoff coverage tomorrow. Thank you, Doris. We'll have fun down there. We'll see you as soon as we can. Bye, Greeny. All right, that's Doris Burke with us down there. Don't forget to listen to ESPN Audio at home via your smart speaker. Let me read that again. I should put my glasses on. This is the worst thing that has happened since I left Mike and Mike. I want to tell everybody what happened. I can read just fine, but I got new contacts so I can see further when I play golf because I hit the ball further than I used to. And as a consequence, I don't read as well. Don't forget to listen to ESPN Audio at home via your smart speaker. ESPN Audio at home brought to you by Mercedes-Benz Vans. Drive a Mercedes-Benz van and find out how far an extra mile really goes. From customization and service to financial assistance, Mercedes-Benz Vans are ready for anything. Bill Belichick is about to change the sport. Talk about it with Marcus Spears next. I'm Greeny, and this day, Greeny rolling on ESPN Radio, on your TV, on ESPN News. Christine just said it. Brett Favre live in a half hour. Except he's not live. We taped it yesterday, but he'll be with us in a half hour, and it's a terrific interview. He is extremely candid, and we went pretty deep on a bunch of different things. We've talked a lot of hoops this morning, but I want to get back into the football because it is my opinion Bill Belichick is about to change the sport. He's got 2 quarterbacks there who play the game differently, Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton. And they talked to Belichick this morning about the possibility of platooning his quarterbacks, something they've been doing in college forever. And everything in the NFL copies college these days.
So they talked to him about the possibility of platooning his quarterbacks, and as only he can, Belichick says it's a possibility.
Yeah, it might. I would always say I'll do it. I think it's best for the team. What gives us the best chance to win. So whatever that is, I would certainly consider that. If it's run unbalanced line or double unbalanced line or 23 personnel or whatever it is. If it helps us win, then I would consider anything.
Let's talk about it further with my absolute favorite, the big swagoo, Marcus Spears, who was terrific with us this morning and every morning that we have him on Get Up. And Marcus, I have a bunch of things I want to get to with you, but I want to start here. It is my belief that the pros have started copying the colleges in so many different ways with the way they run their offense and the spread and the RPO and everything else, that a natural next progression of that is for a team that doesn't have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback to try playing 2 instead of 1 at the position. Do you think we will see it? And does New England this year seem like a place for it to start?
Gee, it's a possibility, but I'm still, call me old school, call me whatever you want. I still think you're in a better position when you have one guy. So you can focus all of your attention on him getting ready to go out and execute a game plan. Listen, we've seen the college moniker already. Look at Lamar Jackson. Look at Deshaun Watson. We are not far removed from quarterbacks not being able to run and don't design plays for them to get outside of the pocket, and they shouldn't be taken off. You shouldn't have an implementation of quarterbacks being able to, with plays built in for them to run the football. And i.e., we look at New England like you asked about. Cam Newton, one of the biggest travesties was the fact that he's been injured. And everybody attributes that to the fact that Cam Newton is physical and he runs out of the pocket. But to be honest with you, G, I don't want to say this too loud, Cam Newton has actually been hurt more from the pocket than he has getting outside of the pocket and running. So it's a big misnomer. I don't think that NFL teams are ready to commit to saying, hey, we're going to bring 2 guys in, we're going to run this system all season long. Now, obviously, if you find kinks in the armor of defenses like the Saints implement with Taysom Hill, and they can add a few things, a few plays to get guys in the game that may exploit something that the defense doesn't do well, yes, I'm all for it. Go for it. And we look at Bill Belichick, and like you and I talked about this morning, Bill Belichick is all about the knowns. He wants to know what the game plan is, who is my guy, and that's not to say he can't have a 2 QB system. But based on everything that we've seen Bill Belichick do and evolve around and grow is the fact that he deals in the fact I want to know what my guys are going to be every Sunday. And I just don't think he has that sense of security with a 2-quarterback system. I could be absolutely wrong. That could be something Josh McDaniels wants to do on the offensive side of the ball, to use some of Cam's tools to add to this offense. I believe Cam Newton is going to be the starter. I believe they are going to implement a plan for Cam Newton to have success as well as the New England offense. And I believe they go forward with that. I just don't buy the 2-quarterback system in the NFL. And it's going to be a hard turn for somebody to convince me that that's the best way to win in that league.
All right, I'll keep working on you on that one. Marcus Spears with me here on ESPN Radio. Okay, here's the real thing I want to ask you today. Because people ask me this all the time. And I don't know what the right answer is. We're supposed to have answers for everything. I don't have an answer for this question. People ask me all the time, should they be playing college football this fall? Marcus, what is the right answer to that question?
Yes, G, but they have to stop worrying about PR, and they have to admit that these college athletes are not amateurs, and they are either semi-pro or professional players. Based on look, this pandemic has torn down the structure of this idealistic NCAA student-athlete amateurism. We look at North Carolina, like you and I talked about, send the students home, keep the football players here. I'm sure that would be the plan for the SEC if it comes to that. That'll be the plan for the Big 12. That'll be the plan for the ACC. We look at the conferences that are having success. And the caveat would be, well, Marcus, the Big 10 and the Pac-12, they sent their players home, and we don't know what the financial ramifications, the damage that will be done from those particular schools. I would love to see how much of football is a product of making sure that those schools are legitimately sustainable. I know where I've been covering for the last 5 years. You take away the football program for a year or two, those schools are not sustainable to a point where you may have schools closed down as opposed to just certain athletic programs and teams and whatever those athletic parts of it is, even some parts of the core curriculum, or you can't continue to keep buildings open or pay bills. I don't know if that's the case in the Big Ten or the Pac-12. I'm not going to speak on that like I do from a business standpoint. I know in the SEC, if LSU don't play, if Alabama doesn't play, maybe not Georgia because they have a lot of teams around them, a lot of things surround them that could possibly float. But some of these towns would be depleted if they don't have football. So yes, but back to my original, G, you got to go ahead and admit that these are not amateurs. This is a money-making tool. This is how we support everything we support on campus. And see, for a long time, we had this conversation and everybody tried, not everybody, because you and I have had this conversation a bunch, and you know where I stand on it. But people have tried to be politically correct. People have tried to say this and that about, they getting a free education and they got a scholarship and they eat what they want and they do all of this stuff at study hall. Yes, all of that is true. And all of those are not free. They are byproducts of you providing a service to your university. And most people that provide a service to any infrastructure or company are considered employees, which college football players are, especially in the Power Five. So yes, play football, put them in a bubble, send the students home, make sure that that is the safest place, because there's a legitimate argument that these places are safer than where these athletes would go if you don't have them in school and they don't play football. Legitimate argument and reasons for that being said. But let's not play and pretend no longer that these are not businesses and they are student athletes, amateurs. They got all the support of a medical staff and all that. No, they semi-professionals. They provide a service to potentially all of the university surviving, and that's what we're seeing now. So in a way, the pandemic has exposed on football side how important it is for those football games to be played in order for everything else across that campus to be sustained.
I think that's 100% right. Marcus, I'm so proud of you. It's a delight, as always. Thank you, my man. I'll see you later in the week.
G, let me say this, man, and I know I've said it to you privately and personally, and I think I've even said it publicly, but let me reiterate how important you've been on this journey, man. We launch NFL Live Monday the 24th, and I sat with you over dinner. We worked out together, and I said, G, what should I do? What should my next move be? You always said, stay patient, make sure you continue to work, and do the work is the thing you told me all the time. So Monday we launch a show, and I'm blessed to be involved in that show with Dan Orlovsky, another one who came on Get Up and Youth Coach, Laura Rutledge, Mina Kimes, and we have this opportunity to put a show together. But from me personally, brother, all of those things you told me, taught me, you put me in a position to shine on your shows and your platforms. So Monday the 24th should be a celebration for you as well, man, because you're a big reason I'm able to have what is now considered a show that I have as a property of my own.
I feel like a coach who has a tree now with you and Orlovsky and Rutledge and the three of you. I'll be watching 4 o'clock starting Monday on ESPN. Proud as can be. I love you, big fella. I'll see you later.
Love you, man. All right, take care, brother.
Marcus Spears, who's as good a guy as you could possibly be. I have more to say on the Belichick thing, and don't forget, Brett Favre is on the way coming up. I'm Greeny, and this. On we go on ESPN Radio, your home for the NBA playoffs. Tune in tonight. Kawhi and the Clippers taking on Luka and the Mavs, presented by Indeed. Coverage begins 8:30 Eastern on most of these ESPN radio stations. I'm Greeny, presented by Progressive Insurance. Brett Favre in 15 minutes. We'll be right here. Meantime, I want to go back to what we were saying about Bill Belichick. I touched on it briefly with Marcus. And that is that I believe if there was someone who is going to figure this out, it's going to be Bill. I'm old enough to remember a time when colleges in football tried to emulate what they were doing in the pros. We have now reversed that completely. In the same way that it used to be that televised sports would try to emulate the in-stadium experience, and that has been reversed to where now in stadiums they're trying to emulate the home experience. In the same way, it used to be that colleges were trying to figure out how to play like they were pros. And what has actually happened now is the pros are playing like colleges. And I would like to tell you that I was ahead of that. So let me give you some Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Years ago on Mike and Mike, I asked that question a million times. I asked Golick, I asked Chris Carter, I asked anybody who would come on. I keep seeing these college teams running these spread offenses. Why can't they do that in the NFL? And the answers kept coming back, oh, the defenses are far too sophisticated and the athletes are all better. I kept getting a million answers. Well, in the end, what wound up happening is the NFL offenses now look exactly like the college offenses. Now the quarterbacks are running. Now they run RPOs. They do all the things they do in college, except one, and that is play multiple quarterbacks. In college, there are a lot of teams that do not have a great quarterback, and so they play two. One who can run and the other who can throw. And they alternate them series by series, sometimes play by play. Now, if you have Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, you have guys like that, you're not doing that, obviously. Anytime you take Patrick Mahomes off the field, you are weakening yourself. But most teams don't have that guy. At least half the teams in the NFL don't have any facsimile of that guy. One of them is going to consider playing two people. And I wouldn't put it past Belichick to be that guy. I think it would make a lot of sense. And there are a lot of other reasons why it might work. As you get to know me here, as I come back to radio, and many of you hearing me for the first time, you will know that my two least favorite words in sports are load management. I hate load management. There should be no load management. If the players can't play every game, that means there are too many games. It doesn't mean they should sit some of them out. I hate it in basketball. It's a disgrace. That's a different conversation for a different time. But they could load manage football players, and they don't. I brought this up to Sean Payton on Get Up about 2-3 months ago. He didn't laugh at me. Drew Brees, the last couple of years, has looked like last year he got hurt at one point, but the year before, he looked like the MVP of the league until about week 12. And then at the age of 39 or whatever he was then, he looked like his arm got tired, and he just wasn't the same. And it is just the constant throw after throw after throw, because you have to do it on Wednesday and you have to do it on Thursday. Even if they try and give them a little bit of a break, these guys are throwing hundreds of balls a week. Think what a difference it might make if you could load manage a quarterback. If you could load manage Drew Brees. I think Pittsburgh made a mistake by not signing Jameis Winston. They could load manage Ben in his return. That's why Jameis Winston, to me, was the most valuable, the most overlooked free agent prospect ever this offseason. Now, he wound up in a great place. Jameis Winston is still going to have a big NFL career, and he wound up in the perfect spot to do it. He will slide into Drew's seat whenever Drew is ready to vacate it. And he will step in there, and he will play in Sean Payton's offense, and Sean Payton will coach him up. And Jameis Winston, who has as much pure talent and ability as any quarterback in the NFL, I think is going to be really good. He will always be, to some degree, interception prone. But so was the guy I'm having on the show in 10 minutes, Brett Favre, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So I think Jameis is going to be just fine. But just envision a scenario where you say to yourself, Brees is going to sit week 6 and week 11. You're just making those dates up. You pick it out on the schedule, games you figure you can afford to lose, whatever it is. And by that, I mean, he's not playing at all. He's not practicing. He's not involved. Give him the week off. Let him rest that arm. Let him look at tape, hang out with his kids, do whatever he wants. And let Jameis play. That's something they don't do in football, but they could. And maybe Belichick does it. Maybe Belichick makes Jarrett Stidham the starter, because everything we're hearing coming out of there, and I'll have Mike Reese on Get Up tomorrow morning, our Patriots reporter, get a little more detail on exactly what we're seeing, is that Cam, understandably, is way behind on learning the offense. He didn't get there until about 10 minutes ago. There is no preseason. You can only learn so much on Zoom, and he hasn't even had time to do that. Stidham has been there a much longer time, obviously was there all of last year, and he watched the most accomplished quarterback of all time run the offense. So Stidham is going to be more ready to play when the season starts. Cam is the better player. If Cam is healthy, obviously, Cam is as good as practically anybody. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see both of those guys play and for that to be part of the plan. Not necessarily for Cam to just take the job away, but for teams preparing for the Patriots every week, not to know who the quarterback is going to be. Who but Belichick would do that? Belichick would live for that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't put it past him. I brought it up to Shefty today on Get Up, and Shefty sort of agreed.
It's very hard to do that in this day and age, and I think that it has not worked in the past, and it has not worked for a reason. And we could go back over any number of examples in history. I think the fact of the matter is teams want to have one quarterback. There are many reasons why. I don't see that changing anytime soon, but this is an unconventional season, and this might be an unconventional solution for the Patriots to deploy.
So he opened the door a crack, opened it a crack for the Greeny plan there. And as I tell you every day, mine is that sort of rare genius that will not be fully appreciated until long after its time. But I want this on the record, that this was my idea. Because I said this about the college spread offenses, and everyone laughed at me, and so I just dropped it. I'm not dropping this. There are teams that could play two quarterbacks, and it would be effective. I understand that they would present challenges. But football is a place where they never want to change anything. And the teams that do successfully wind up being great. Baltimore went 14-2 last year by playing a quarterback the way everyone says you can't play a quarterback. So this change is coming. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. We'll talk more basketball in our next hour. Lakers are not in trouble. Neither are the Bucks. I'll explain both of those. But first, the legend, Brett Favre, joins me right after this.
ESPN News.
Yes, it is. Back and busier than ever on a jam-packed Wednesday. NBA playoffs are hot. We're all over it. We've talked about it. Lakers are going to be fine. Bucks are not. All that and a whole lot more in the hopper. But special guest today. In this spot in this show, as often as we can, we will bring you someone really special that we can spend a little extra time with. And today we have the Super Hall of Famer, one of the most beloved players in pro football history, Brett Favre. And when you have a guest of this magnitude, you have to prepare something special for the introduction. So, we did.
There's a lot of guys who can do some things, and I call those something guys because they can do something. Then there's some guys who can do everything, and there are not a lot of those guys. I mean, there's only one or two or three of those guys in a generation. I call those guys everything guys because they do everything. And then there's one guy who can do more than everything, and I call that guy Brett Favre.
That's Frank Caliendo, and there he is. The legendary Brett Favre is with me here on ESPN Radio. And Brett, I just wanted to know, so I talked to Caliendo about doing that, and then we got to talking about that impression and how much it sort of helped grow your myth and your legend, and where we basically netted out is that he now thinks he's the reason you're in the Hall of Fame. I just wonder what your reaction to that is.
He's got a good point. I would think it boosted both of our careers, Frank and myself.
You know, it's funny because they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but he doesn't do an imitation of you. He does an imitation of someone idolizing you, worshiping you, which is even better. It is even better than the sincerest form of flattery. What do you think of that impression and the million times?
I agree 100%. In fact, I mean, this tells you how good he is. When I heard that just now, I thought that was actually John Madden. So he does a wonderful impression, and I suppose there could be worse impressions or not positive. He could do an impression, but not be positive statements. So I'm honored not only that Frank would do that, but also that Coach Madden, for whatever reason, liked me so much.
Okay. Let me get a couple of the sort of current things into the conversation here, because there's so much I want to talk to you about your career. But let's just start. I mean, obviously, the situation in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, which is in so many ways identical to the one that you went through 15 years ago. And you've talked a good deal about it. I guess what I would ask you is, for those of us on the outside, like, how would you describe what it feels like? When you're the quarterback of a team, you own the town, and they draft a guy that everybody now knows is going to replace you. Like, how would you put into words what that actually feels like when it's you?
You know, it may surprise people, but I wasn't when that happened. When we drafted Aaron, there is one big difference when you compare the two situations, and that big difference is when we drafted Aaron, we were coming off of a bad year. When they drafted Jordan Love this year, they were coming off of a play or two or a player away from the Super Bowl. So it's a big difference, which is one of the reasons I said I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go with an immediate need, being that they were so close to the Super Bowl. So that's a big difference. And I think Aaron felt the same way too. He wasn't upset that they drafted a quarterback. He was more upset that they didn't get an immediate need, whatever that is. It's not for me to say, but I think if anything, the reality kind of hits you, if it hadn't already, that the end is nearer than it had been at any other time in your career. You know, that they finally have drafted a quarterback, or assuming that they've drafted the next person to take the reins. And so when that end will be is always a question. And I never felt threatened. I just felt like, and really in the big picture, I felt like the odd man out at that time in my career, even though I was the guy who had been on that team the longest, because all the coaching staff that drafted me or traded for me that was there when we won the Super Bowl, well, they were all gone. Every player that I played with in '96 was gone. And I felt like the odd man out. And that really, drafting Aaron really kind of accelerated the I'm the odd man out mentality.
It's a really interesting thought. One more on that, and that is, I saw you recently were quoted as saying you could see him going to Chicago. That would be the only thing that I would imagine could torture Packers fans more than you going to Minnesota. How much of that is a part of it? How much does that rivalry factor into thoughts like that?
Well, I really kind of said it jokingly, to be honest with you. Do I think that would happen? Nothing would surprise me in today's game. I never thought I'd see Tom Brady play in another uniform. Going back to Joe Montana, I thought it was absolutely impossible for him to leave San Francisco. And then, with me, you see guys retire, unretire. You see guys change teams quite often. So nothing would surprise me. But I can't imagine. I don't care what the trade is. I cannot imagine the Packers allowing Aaron to play against them in the division. Now, in saying that, I thought the same thing with me. But, again, I said that jokingly because we were talking about my career and how things ended up. But I would certainly think that Packer fans would mutiny, whatever you want to call it. But it would be a sight to behold.
Let's see what happens. It would be fun for the rest of us. Okay, let's talk about something much more fun. I keep hearing everyone say, as we watch Patrick Mahomes, who has begun his career in about as spectacular a fashion as can be imaginable, I keep hearing comparisons to you. When you watch Patrick Mahomes play, what do you see, and does he remind you of you?
Yeah, I think our styles are very, very similar. And I'll say this with Aaron Rodgers in mind, too. I'm really impressed with how they're able to be somewhat of a gunslinger, but protect the ball. I didn't protect the ball near as well as those guys, obviously. I was a lot more reckless, and it's hard to play reckless and protect the ball. So that's the big difference, and it is a huge difference. To make big plays, and it's not like he's dinking and dunking. And the same can be said for Aaron. They're making unbelievable plays inside and outside of the pocket, but they're also protecting the ball, which is nothing short of amazing.
And obviously, a lot of credit for that goes to the development in Andy Reid. And I just wanted to get a thought from you on this, because I have had conversations with Andy Reid and John Gruden, who were together on the staff, when you were at Green Bay, and they would tell me stories about how competitive they were with each other, that they would fight all the time about seeing which one of them could design more plays that you liked and that Mike Holmgren liked and that they ran. What are your recollections of that with these two now legendary figures, Andy Reid and John Gruden?
Absolutely 100% correct. Obviously they were in their infant stages of their coaching career, much like my playing career. But they were ultra competitive, not only against each other, but against other coaches, and very challenging to their players. And so when Andy took over as quarterback coach, I'll be honest with you, he was the offensive lineman at BYU, protected Jim McMahon. And I'm thinking, what can he teach me at the quarterback position? But he challenged me. We didn't meet a great deal, but what we met about was very useful. I mean, he was just very challenging in a way that you enjoyed going to work and being in his meetings. And it was fun to see the banter between both coaches back and forth, but also the other coaches as well.
It's fun, and the role they played in developing your career, and you played, obviously, in what they went on to do. Okay, now I just want to have some fun. I've never had a chance to talk to you in this general of a sense. So we know you played against some of the great defensive players of all time. Was there ever a guy you just wouldn't throw at? I'm thinking of Deion Sanders. But was there ever a guy that if he was on the field, you just weren't throwing it in his direction?
Yeah, it would be Deion Sanders. And in saying that, I challenged him. I think I threw one ball. I threw more than one ball to Deion in the pros. I'm going to say maybe two or three. But say it's three. Two of those were crossing routes, which was not what he enjoyed covering because there was a lot of picks and things like that. So if you were going to get Deion, it was going to be on a crossing route. But I challenged him on an out route when he was with Dallas in Green Bay in the playoff game, and he took it to the house, of course. But at Florida State, the first play ever against Florida State for me, we did a rollout to the left, and lo and behold, I throw it at Deion. I hit him right in the numbers, and he goes all the way to the house, does his dance. So I learned my lesson.
For people who aren't old enough to have seen him play, there's a lot of people listening to this conversation who didn't. How good was he?
I haven't seen anyone up to this day come close to how he played. And I'm talking about defensively. What about kick returning? I mean, if you kicked to Deion, you were absolutely insane. And if you threw at Deion, you were absolutely insane. This guy was the most talented DB or talented athlete I have ever seen that I've faced across from him. Tremendous player.
Brett, when you look back on your career, what's the one game you remember the most fondly? The one game or moment that that brings you the most joy when you look back on it now?
Well, there's several. But I'd have to say the Oakland game, which I think most people would agree is their favorite for obvious reasons. I wanted to honor my dad, not just by playing, but playing better than I had ever played in my career. And at halftime, I'd already had better statistics than I'd had in any four-quarter game ever. And we needed to win the game. I think that gets overlooked at times. In order to have a playoff opportunity, we had to win that game. And I knew that just playing was not good enough. And so, you know what? I don't know of any other way I could have honored my dad the way I did.
I had a feeling that's the one you'd think of. How about the other side? What's the one that still, every player has a game that still keeps them up all these years after they retire, that you wake up in the middle of the night and it still breaks your heart? What's that game?
The championship game against the Saints when I was with Minnesota. As many hits as I took and as physically beat down as I was, I still had an opportunity to win that game in spite of all that stuff. And I made a poor choice. And that's what haunts me. I have no ill feelings towards the Saints. Never did, never will. my feeling about that game is I personally blew it, and that's hard to live with.
Who's the one player in history, whether it was someone you played against or that you've seen, that you would have loved to have played with? If I could let you have played with any one player in NFL history that you didn't get a chance to play with, who would it be?
Well, my favorite of all time is Roger Staubach. I'd love to play with him, but that would mean I would be sitting the bench.
That might be true. That could be an interesting debate. It would be an interesting coach's decision, one way or the other. All right, final one for you, Brett, and that is, when people talk about you, and we joked about Madden at the beginning, but sometimes they talk about you as almost a mythical figure. You're like more of a legend almost than people look at you as a player. What do you hope people remember about your career? Like when people talk about Brett Favre, who was a football player once, what would you like them to say?
Real simple, that no one had as much fun and no one had as much passion for the game as I did. I don't care about people saying he was the best passer, he was the best gunslinger. None of that stuff matters. What matters is what kind of teammate I was, and I think most of the guys that I played with would speak up on my behalf, that I was in it for them first, and I had tremendous passion, and I just loved to play with my teammates, and that never wavered in 20 years.
Brett, this is my first week doing this back, and it really means a lot to me that you did it. Thank you for making the time. You stay healthy, and I'll see you down the road.
All right, Greeny. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so that was Brett Favre, and we taped that yesterday, and I'm really appreciative of him. When we decided to come back and do this show, we set aside this slot that I have this extra time. That was a long interview, and I think there's a lot to talk to Brett about, and I hope everyone, all of you, enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed having that conversation with him and my appreciation to him. And I want to make a point about Brett Favre, and it's a larger issue. So I put a poll question up on my Twitter. If you're not following me, you should be, at ESPN Greeny, because we'll do a lot of our connection on there. And I put a poll question up pretty much every day, and we use the poll on Get Up, and we use it here. And, you know, the Packers have three of the great quarterbacks of all time in their history. They have Bart Starr, they have Brett Favre, they have Aaron Rodgers. And I asked the question, who's the greatest quarterback in Packers history? And with a majority of the vote, over 50% of the vote are voting for Brett Favre. And it is a testament to just how beloved he is. Because the reality is you can argue it almost any way you want. But Bart Starr is the most forgotten about great player ever. Bart Starr, who was drafted one spot later than Tom Brady. Brady was the 199th pick. Starr was drafted 200th. Still has the highest postseason passer rating in NFL history. He was 9-1 in the playoffs. He won 5 championships, including the first 2 Super Bowls, and was the MVP of both. So that's Bart Starr. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback I've ever seen. Not the greatest. Brady is the greatest. But Rodgers is the best. Patrick Mahomes is on the verge of eclipsing that. I'm not sure exactly when we hand that mantle over to Mahomes. If you wanted to do it now, and some people are, I'd probably argue we need to see it a little longer. He's clearly headed in that direction. But until he takes it, the one he's taking it from is Rodgers, who in my lifetime took it from Elway. Elway was the best quarterback I ever saw. Combination of athleticism, throwing the football, tough as hell. John Elway was as tough as it came. It popped in the chops on get up in the next play and throw a 60-yard touchdown. Elway was unbelievable. Rodgers replaced him, in my eyes, as the best quarterback I ever saw, and Mahomes is about to do that. But Favre just had something about him, and the best way I can explain it is this. When Favre got traded to the Jets, for those of you who don't know me and are getting to know me, I have been a Jet fan since before I was born. My parents were season ticket holders when they were the Titans before I came along. So the Jets are in my blood, and they will be for the rest of my life. So Favre comes to the Jets on my birthday, and I'm hosting Mike and Mike at that time, so I start talking about it on the air. And I'm asking for Packer fans. I know how much you love this guy, and obviously I've watched him. And I asked the question, why is it, on the air, I asked the question, why is it you love him so much? And we had a call, and I still remember it. I remember it so vividly. A caller says to me, Greeny, here's what's going to happen. He's going to throw a terrible interception, and you're going to want to kill him. and you're going to have like 3 consecutive 3-and-outs, and you're going to be thinking, what is it about this guy? And then there's going to come a play where it's 3rd and 14. One guy is hanging on his leg. Another guy has his helmet down and is about to drill him in the ribs. And Favre will throw a 15-yard rope for the first down. Guy will break a tackle, go running for a touchdown, and Favre will be the second guy to get to the end zone. He will be running faster than anyone else to go and celebrate because he'll be the most excited person in the entire stadium that this just happened. And he said, in that moment, Greeny, you will know why. And you will love him too. And he's right. That's exactly right. Favre's 1 year with the Jets, by the way, is the most forgotten, outstanding season in NFL history. Favre was terrific with the Jets. And at one point that year, the Jets looked like a Super Bowl team. And then he got hurt, and that was the end of that, and they wound up not even making the playoffs. And the guy they turned their back on to do it was Chad Pennington. He wound up in the division, was comeback player of the year, and won the division that year. It was a year that the one of 2 years that Brady didn't win it through all that time. My point is, his 1 year with the Jets was much better than people remember. The year, that one terrific season in Minnesota, whereas he just talked about, he has them in the NFC Championship game, then he throws a terrible interception, and they wind up losing. You just heard him say that haunts him more than any other game in his career, that he feels that he blew it. He said it. I didn't have to. And then, but of course, he'll always be remembered as a Packer, and he is in his own way, and Madden added to that, and there's just a stature. There's just something about Favre. There are some players you just love them, and it's kind of hard to explain why. In my lifetime, and it's before me, but in my world, Joe Namath had that quality. That's probably just based primarily on the fan base that I grew up in and around, and the fact that he won that one biggest game ever, and that he had that swagger and all the rest of that. Namath is my Favre. I'm not from Green Bay. He had one very nice year with the Jets, and I loved watching Brett Favre play. Namath is my Favre. We all have a Favre, right? We all have a guy who's our Favre. We all think of one player, maybe several, but at least one, that we love the way the Packer fans love Brett Favre, and they always will. And here they are, 15 years after he left there, still voting for him in huge numbers over Bart Starr and Aaron Rodgers, because whether he was better than them or not doesn't matter. There was something about Favre he just loved. All right, coming up, the biggest decision of the NFL preseason is being made right now. We will check in the room where it happens to find out exactly where it's going right after this word from Straight Talk Wireless. It's time for some Straight Talk. You know what covering your bases is in baseball, right? Making sure you have news. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and we're going to give the Shell Pennzoil Performance line a workout here. Came up with a new idea today. Going to give it a go. There's a lot of big questions out there in sports, and it occurs to me that we have the unlimited resources here on this show to try and get you some of the answers. Stuff that I'm wondering about. So I got one question for a bunch of different people, and we're going to fire them around and see if we can't get ourselves some answers. In my opinion right now, let's start in Chicago.
I have only one question.
The biggest quarterback question going into the NFL season is who's going to be the starting quarterback with the Chicago Bears this year, Trubisky or Foles? Jeff Dickerson, ESPN's NFL Nation Bears reporter, might have that answer. Jeff, what have we seen so far?
So, Greeny, 2 padded practices thus far that have been open to us. They're splitting reps equally. On Monday, Trubisky was the first guy on the huddle. Yesterday, it was Foles. I mean, I would say, Greeny, having covered all these training camps over the years, every 2 days of training camp, you're going to have some good throws and some bad throws. Trubisky's had some good moments, some bad moments. Same with Nick Foles. I thought, though, Greeny, the key was yesterday when Bears head coach Matt Nagy, I asked him on our Zoom call, can he say right now definitively that Trubisky is a better player than he was last year? Because everyone knows that last year was not good enough. And Nagy kind of paused and says, I don't have that answer yet. We just have to wait and see how it goes. So I would say Nick Foles, given the fact that he's had no offseason work with this team, the fact that he's come out and looked respectable, and these two guys are certainly, I think, at least even at this point, is certainly good for Foles. I'm not sure it's great for Trubisky.
All right, Jeff, we'll keep a close eye on that. Thank you very much, my man.
I only have one question.
My next question is in Milwaukee. Journal Sentinel Bucks beat reporter Matt Velasquez is with me here on ESPN Radio. Matt, the Bucks have just looked bad from the moment this thing restarted. The most consistent team in the NBA over the course of the last 2 years have just looked bad, and they looked bad again in their first playoff game against Orlando. Can you put your finger on why, and is the solution easy to find?
I think it's really just they're not themselves. They're not being themselves. They're not playing as hard as they used to. They're not as consistent, not as cohesive. I think the schemes themselves aren't necessarily bad or wrong or broken. I think it's just kind of the players who haven't gotten to a flow. And maybe it's because they didn't play a ton of minutes. They didn't get a lot of time together during the seeding games. They didn't really take those super seriously, even though they would say they did. The results kind of speak for themselves. And I think they need to they need to do some soul searching, and we'll see what kind of soul searching comes up with when they play the Magic again tomorrow.
Would you describe Giannis as angry? How would you describe his psyche right now with the way the team is playing and being in a 1-0 hole in the playoffs?
I don't think he's angry, but I would say he's frustrated. He's not happy with how things are going. I don't think anyone on that team is happy with how things are going. This isn't who they are, and that's been the constant refrain, is that they haven't been themselves, and they need to figure out how to become themselves. Otherwise, all of their dreams and goals are going to go out the window after such a good season.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I got to ask him one question.
And then one more. My buddy Mike Reese covers the Patriots for us. He's on with me on Get Up all the time. And, Mike, I'm intrigued with this conversation that started this morning with Belichick about the possibility of a platoon system at quarterback with Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton. What can you tell me?
Well, it's very interesting, Greeny. I was at the third practice at camp today, and Cam Newton's taken off on these design runs up the field. And then you have Jarrett Stidham, more of the traditional quarterback who's ripping it, in different all areas of the field. And the whole idea is, can Cam catch up, to the playbook? He only signed July 8th. So he's got a lot of catch-up to do, and can they run everything they would want to run with him? So the question's asked to Belichick, hey, would you almost combine it and platoon it and consider doing something like that with the contrasting skill sets of the two quarterbacks? And he said he would never rule anything out if he felt like it gave the Patriots the best chance to win.
Which is exactly what you would expect Belichick to say. Bottom line question on this, Mike Reese. The day before the opening game against Miami, will Belichick have announced will we know who the starting quarterback is going to be?
I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is no, Greeny, because he's going to want to keep the Dolphins guessing. But I will say this, I will be surprised if Cam Newton isn't really the guy. And when all is said and done in this discussion, you know what I see, Greeny? I see the players responding to him and to the energy he's bringing to the practice field. So I'm actually going to go out and say I think it would be an upset if he isn't the guy after all is said and done.
Okay, great work. Reese, thanks, my man. I'll see you on Get Up at some point in the next few days. That's one question with us here on ESPN Radio. It's pretty good. All right, I think we could use a little work there, maybe a little more setup, but generally speaking, I like it. We run around the world of sports there. We find out the things that are going on. Just recapping, I think the Trubisky versus Foles thing is as interesting as anything in the NFL. This is a team that traded up to I don't need to keep rubbing this salt in the wounds of all of my friends and family in Chicago. But everybody knows they traded up to take Mitch Trubisky ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. And now this is it. I mean, this is his Waterloo. I mean, either he beats out Foles or it's over there. So that one is fascinating for me to watch. The Bucs, I believe they will bounce back and win this series, but they've just looked terrible since the whole thing restarted again in the bubble. And then the Belichick thing, if you were listening earlier, I told you, I think if anyone's going to turn the sport on its ear and play two quarterbacks, it would be Bill Belichick. We'll see if he does it. I'm Greeny. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. At Progressive, they're making things even easier. They will help you bundle your home and car insurance together so you can save on both. Learn more at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Can I tell you my favorite thing that happened in sports last night? For all the interesting NBA stuff we had, the Lakers losing and LeBron and everything else, Fernando Tatis Jr., again with a lead, stole third last night off the pitcher who had thrown behind Manny Machado the night before. Are you following this story? The whole world, including his own manager, browbeating 21-year-old Fernando Tatis Jr. for hitting a grand slam on a 3-0 pitch the other night with a 7-run lead because the whole world has gone nuts, including one of my favorite people in the world. It breaks my heart. Joe Torre, whom I love and who was one of my absolute favorite people, is on the Michael Kay Show on ESPN Radio New York yesterday. He took the wrong side of this.
Ball's teed up for you, base is loaded. He's going to throw a ball, if he can throw a ball down the middle, just not to walk him with the bases loaded, lose him by, 7 runs. I'm not a fan of that. I think it's rubbing it in. Teams have blown leads. I mean, it wasn't like the old Army back when I played, with a 5-run lead, you didn't steal a base late in the game, stuff like that. But, runs are scored at will anymore. So it's a mixed bag, but I'm still not comfortable with it.
He's not comfortable with it. Joe is not comfortable with it. I can't believe what I'm hearing. This isn't stealing a base. He's up. What's he supposed to do? He's batting. Is he supposed to put himself, he's up 3-0 on the pitcher. Is he supposed to put himself into a 3-2 situation, and then is he allowed to hit a home run? Like, what is he allowed to do? Of all the unwritten rules, this is the stupidest one I've ever heard. And thank goodness Manny Acta, of all people, Manny Acta tweeted this yesterday. And if you've never heard of Manny Acta, it's because, well, he's just not that famous. But he was a player in my youth. And Manny Acta tweeted, while coaching third base in Montreal, I held up a runner at third out of respect for the other club. Frank Robinson was the manager. He almost grabbed me by the ear and he said to me, listen, son, you only have enough runs when you're showering after a win. Thank God for Frank Robinson. I can't believe what I'm hearing with this. I get the unwritten rules. I get not rubbing it in your opponent's face. But if you're supposed to stop playing the game, then just insert the mercy rule. Put a rule in that says if it's a 7-run lead, the game is over. If the game is not over, that 21-year-old kid should be trying to hit a home run. Hey, you can stream Our Time, the new series on ESPN+. You get an all-access look at Oklahoma State football as they reopen campus, deal with COVID-19 testing, and an investigation of head coach Mike Gundy. Stream new episodes every Thursday only on ESPN+. Up next, I will tell you about the night that ESPN convinced me that my wife would never marry me. That's next. I'm Greeny. This is ES Line. One's going to join me in just a second. And it's that time of year. The NFL's almost here, and ESPN Fantasy Football's around the corner. Draft your team, compete with your friends, and take home the crown. Sign up now at ESPN.com/fantasyfootball today. So, recapping what we've done so far this morning, the Lakers are not in trouble. They'll be fine. The Bucks are going to win their series as well. Brett Favre was live here, and he was awesome. And baseball has absolutely lost its mind. But right now, there's one thing I really want you to know.
I need you to listen carefully. I just want you to know.
I just want you to know this. So, I will be an employee of ESPN for 24 years next week. And I will never forget the first time I was ever on ESPN. This was long before anyone had ever heard of anything called Mike and Mike. I got hired here to be an anchor at ESPN News. And they started me by putting me on one SportsCenter. I got to do SportsCenter on a Saturday evening. And I anchored a 30-minute SportsCenter. And my then girlfriend, now wife, traveled here from Chicago, where we'd been living, to sort of celebrate with me. So I anchor the show. We go out for dinner to celebrate. This is the crowning achievement of my lifetime. I was 29 years old. I sit down at the table in the restaurant, and the waiter comes over, and he says, oh, we are so excited to have you here. I'm a huge sports fan. I love ESPN. I'm thrilled to have you in the restaurant. And he gave me wonderful service, and I'm thinking, I've never felt so good about myself in my entire life. He gives me great service. They bought us dessert, and when he brings the check, he says, and I quote, I just want to say again, Mr. Levy, what a delight it has been to have you here. We really enjoyed it. He thought I was Steve Levy. And in that moment, I thought to myself, this woman will never marry me. So the good news is I was wrong about the second part. But the first part of it, I continue to be proud of. And I've told him that story a million times. And now I'm proud of him because Steve Levy, my longtime friend this week, was announced as the new announcer for Monday Night Football. And I wanted to bring him in on here for a second and talk about that. Hello, Steve. Congratulations.
Greeny, that story never gets old to me. I take that as the highest compliment. And by the way, because I got there a little bit before you, obviously things have flip-flopped and you have overtaken as a massive celebrity. And I wish someone thought I was you, at that point.
Well, let's not be ridiculous here. I'm you're Mr. Fancy Voice of Monday Night Football now. All kidding aside, congratulations, and it is great. You're one of the very few people here now who've been here longer than I have. And so what I wanted to ask you today was this, because you and I grew up similar time, similar place, sort of similar way. Yeah. And I had Brett Favre on earlier, and I was getting into the psychology of how Favre, he wasn't the best player ever. But he was as beloved by the people who rooted for him as any player ever. And it occurs to me that everybody had their Brett Favre. Like my Brett Favre was Joe Namath. And it wasn't about whether he's the greatest of all time. You could never convince me anyone was greater than Joe Namath. I'm 53 years old now. Joe Namath will forever be my favorite player. There's nothing that could ever happen that would change that. Everyone has their Brett Favre. So you, Steve Levy, who was your Brett Favre when you were growing up?
Yeah. When I was going to say Charles Barkley is my contemporary of Brett Favre, right? He was a guy who was beloved in his cities, the work ethic, the exuberance, the joy on his face, those kinds of things that he had. I put Barkley in that Favre class. Not the best player ever, but clearly a superstar. Of course, the difference is, as Shaq pointed out last night, Barkley doesn't have those things, the rings. So Barkley would be a guy like that. And obviously having to come to know him, as you know him as well now, he's so generous, so charitable. He's obviously awesome on television, too. I'm just a huge Charles Barkley fan. And of all the people I've heard from over these last couple of days about Monday night, it was nice Chuck reached out recently. So I've forever been a huge Charles Barkley fan, just the way he played the game at the size he played it, too,
What are you most excited about as you get to take on this new challenge? You've been doing games forever. I've heard you do hockey here for 25 years or whatever it's been. This is a different animal and the first season ever in which the circumstances will be what they'll be. What should we be most looking forward to, assuming we can start this season on time, which everyone is hoping we can?
Yeah, I think it's just bringing it back to the focus to the field, Greeny. I think now so more than ever, it's so important. For some reason, there's been so much attention paid to the Monday Night Football broadcast booth. It's always been, for me, it's always been about the game on the field. And I think we'll try to get that focus back on the field. And our schedule is off the charts. People in the know, our executives think it's the best Monday Night Football schedule we've had in a decade. So, and maybe more. So we're really excited about that. We did that one game last year, the second Monday night game in our traditional doubleheader. And so Lewis and Brian and I got started that way, and thrilled to be with Lisa and John Parry. And so I think we're in a position to succeed, Bud. I really do. I think we are in a position to be successful. And we know the ratings should be up because there can't be any fans in the stands, or at least there won't be a lot of fans in the stands.
That's right.
So
quick final thought.
The games, man. I really can't. Right now, this is really nice, Greeny. This like these couple days have been great. It's been great for my kids and my mom and dad and my sister and family and friends and guys I go back to fourth grade with and Oswego State and all that stuff. But I'm looking forward to getting to work and really getting into the grind of the NFL.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching. Real quick, Steve, 14-2 for the Jets. Realistic or no?
Not realistic. We'll take 10-6. Hey, division's wide open, Greeny. Wide open.
We'll see. Steve, congratulations. You're the man, and it is an honor to be mistaken for you anytime.
Greeny, thanks for having me on. Good luck with the new radio show. If you have any questions about how to do radio or anything, give me a call anytime.
I will. Thank you, my man. Steve Levy. That's a great guy. I was trying to make a list of the people who've been here longer than I have, and there's not too many people on that list, but Steve is. And it's a 100% true story. Guy brings me the check and says, Mr. Levy, it's been great having you. It's time for Making Moves on Greeny. Kawhi Leonard scored 29 in his first playoff game for the Clippers on Monday. Game 2 tonight. Here, ESPN Radio. Making Moves brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Build your winning team today. Go to linkedin.com/sports. I give the Mavericks a real chance to win this game tonight. They probably would have won. They would have certainly had a chance the other night if they don't throw Porzingis out of that game in ridiculous fashion. We could use a little drama and on these off nights. Like we got the good series. Last night's games were phenomenal, obviously, or at least the drama created was phenomenal, particularly with the Lakers losing. But like I told you, they'll be fine. Anyway, really enjoyed today. Thanks again to Brett Favre for being here. I will see you tomorrow morning, 8 Eastern, coast to coast on ESPN for Get Up, and then back here in the afternoon for Greeny. Have a great day, ESPN Radio.
The Pats have 2 former Auburn quarterbacks. So will they go with a college system and rotate QBs? We'll ask our front office insider Mike Tannenbaum when he joins Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.